the day the Scarlet Sails returned. That evening, the sea was too calm, the kind of calm that always felt strange to Amy, as if the ocean wasn't sleeping, only growing quiet enough to listen for something. She sat on the old wooden pier, her knees pulled close to her chest, watching the sun slowly sink into the water. Behind her, the little harbour town carried on with its ordinary life. A fish shop door slammed somewhere in the distance, children laughed near the market square, and gulls drifted lazily above the lighthouse. But Amy barely noticed any of it. Every evening, she came here for the same reason: to wait. Though lately, she wasn't even sure what she was waiting for anymore. When she was a child, someone had told her a strange story. One day, they said, a ship with scarlet sails would appear beyond the horizon, not for riches, not for fame, not to rescue anyone, but for the person who never stopped believing, even after everyone else did. Amy had been 9 years old then. At that age, she believed in everything. Hidden islands, messages in bottles, faraway lighthouses, and the idea that the ocean could return what life had taken away. But people grow older, and adults have a habit of laughing at the things they secretly miss the most. Scarlet sails, the tavern owner used to scoff. These days, the only thing coming into this harbour is cargo ships. You should focus on something real, the neighbour would tell her. The world doesn't work like a fairy tale, her father often repeated. Maybe they were right. And still, every evening Amy returned to the shore, because without that small piece of hope, something inside her felt unbearably empty. She worked in a tiny studio near the docks. Most days she painted signs for cafes or restored faded artwork on old fishing boats. Sometimes hotels hired her to paint murals for tourists. People liked her paintings. But Amy never thought of herself as a real artist. Real artists create something impossible to forget, she once told the old lighthouse keeper. The man smiled faintly. No, he answered. Real artists simply see farther than everyone else. His name was Noah. He had lived beside the lighthouse for so many years that people joked he'd probably arrived with the first stones of the harbour itself. Noah rarely spoke much, but when he did, people listened. One evening, while the sky burned orange over the water, he asked Amy a question she wasn't ready for. Why do you still wait for that ship? She shrugged. Maybe it's just a habit. No, Noah said quietly. It isn't. Then why? The old man looked toward the horizon. Because you're afraid to admit that part of you still hopes. Amy said nothing after that, because he was right. Hope is a strange thing. As children, we carry it naturally, the way we carry breath. But somewhere along the way, people begin teaching each other that hope is childish, unrealistic, dangerous, and yet, sometimes all it takes is one spark to bring it back. That spark arrived a few days later. A foreign ship entered the harbour early one morning. It wasn't large, nothing impressive. Its dark hull carried the scars of countless storms. But there was one unusual thing about it. On board was an artist. His name was Daniel. Tall, quiet, somewhere in his mid-30s, he travelled from coastal town to coastal town, painting old ships, hotels, cafes, and harbour walls. He also had a strange habit. He sketched constantly. People, clouds, broken staircases, old anchors, reflections in puddles, as if he feared the world might disappear before he had the chance to preserve it. Amy first noticed him near the market square. He sat on the ground, sketching an old fisherman repairing his nets. But the way Daniel studied him made it seem as though he were painting a king. Amy stopped walking. Daniel glanced up. "Why are you smiling?" she asked. "Because he's happy," Daniel replied. Amy looked back at the fisherman, weathered coat, rough hands, a tired face shaped by salt and years. And yet, his eyes were calm. For some reason, that unsettled her, as though someone had quietly reminded her of something she'd forgotten long ago. After that, they kept running into each other, sometimes by accident, sometimes not. Daniel was different from the people in town. He didn't mock dreams, didn't speak as though everything meaningful had already disappeared, didn't try to sound wiser than everyone else. Instead, he asked strange questions. When was the last time you did something simply because it made you happy? Why are people so afraid of looking foolish? Why do adults always abandon wonder first?
The story continues in a couple of minutes. Stay with me and listen to the very end.
Sometimes Amy laughed at him, sometimes he annoyed her. But little by little, she noticed something changing. The world seemed brighter around him. One evening, they sat together by the water while the sunset turned the sea gold and copper. "Do you actually believe in scarlet sails?" Daniel asked. Amy smiled faintly. "I don't know anymore. And if they really appeared, then I'd assume the world had gone crazy." Daniel laughed softly. "Maybe the world needs a little madness." She looked at him for a moment before asking, What about you? What do you believe in?" For a long time, he said nothing. Then finally, "I believe most people give up too early." The wind moved gently across the waves. Far away, a ship's horn echoed through the evening fog. "When I was young," Daniel continued, "my father used to say that the moment a person stops waiting for something beautiful, they begin to grow old." "And you?" Amy asked. "Are you still waiting for something beautiful?" Daniel looked toward the horizon. "Yes." "What is it?" A small smile appeared on his face. "I'll know when I see it." After that night, something inside Amy shifted. She began painting again. Not for work, not for tourists, for herself. She painted storms, moonlit water, sunrise reflections, ships disappearing into fog. And for the first time in years, she felt alive while doing it. Meanwhile, the town began noticing strange things. Daniel had bought an old abandoned boat from one of the fishermen. The thing was barely holding together. For weeks, he disappeared into the docks, repairing it by hand. People laughed, of course. The artist's lost his mind. He'll sink before he leaves the harbor. Creative people are always a little crazy. But Daniel ignored them. Then one afternoon, bright scarlet fabric arrived at the port, and suddenly the entire town started talking. No way. He can't be serious. Is he really doing it? Even Amy didn't believe it at first, until the evening she walked down to the docks and saw it. The old boat stood at the pier, transformed. Fresh paint gleamed across the hull. The wood shone golden in the setting sun, and above it, caught in the ocean wind, rose scarlet sails, real scarlet sails, bright, impossible, burning against the blue horizon like fire. Amy froze. For several seconds, she simply stared, afraid that if she blinked, the entire thing would disappear. Daniel stood on the deck, smiling. "You're insane," she whispered. "Probably. Why would you do this?" He leaned lightly against the railing. "Because one day I realized something," he said. "People stop believing in miracles because no one dares to create them anymore." The wind filled the scarlet sails, and in that moment, something unusual happened. The people on shore stopped laughing. Some quietly stepped closer. Others stood watching in silence. Even the old men outside the tavern stared at the ship as though they suddenly remembered what it felt like to be young. Sometimes all it takes is one impossible thing to remind people who they used to be. Daniel held out his hand. "Want to come with me?" Amy looked at the sea, at the glowing sunset, at the scarlet sails rising against the wind, at the town slowly fading behind her. And suddenly she understood. It had never really been about the ship, not about a fairy tale, not about waiting. It was about allowing yourself to believe that life could still become larger than fear, routine, and ordinary days. Amy stepped aboard. The ship slowly drifted away from the harbor. The wind grew stronger. Golden light danced across the waves, and the town became smaller and smaller behind them. Amy stood at the railing, staring toward the endless horizon where the ocean met the sky. "So what happens now?" she asked quietly. Daniel smiled. "Now," he said, "the interesting part begins." And for the first time in many years, Amy no longer felt like someone waiting for life to begin. She finally felt herself moving toward it. Because sometimes scarlet sails don't arrive to change your destiny. Sometimes they arrive so you finally decide to change it yourself.
Thank you for listening to my story to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. Watch it to the end and see the finished painting, which I also painted.